Kiki Mwiti, and the founder and CEO of DYVVYD, which is a Bay Area and Silicon Valley-based investment platform that digitizes investor relations for angel investors, capital funds, and syndicates, granting underrepresented founders access to these investors, foregoing any barriers such as a warm intro, elite network, or Ivy League background. To our founders, we say, come as you are with whatever you're building. And if you have achieved product market fit, we want to hear from you. So welcome to everybody. With me today, I have the distinct pleasure of hosting Arnobio Morelix. He's an executive and data scientist working at the intersection of tech, policy, and social impact. Along his career, he has started his own company, led a global team of PhDs, data scientists, and consultants, advised governments in 35 plus countries on their innovation policies. He's authored research and data science analysis with Stanford University, the World Economic Forum, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Kauffman Foundation, and others. He's also serves as the chief data scientist with Inc. magazine, and is the author of the global bestseller Rebooted, helping companies navigate the post-pandemic world, and which includes external contributions from tech luminaries like Vint Cerf, father of the internet, Martin Cooper, inventor of the cell phone, and more. He's also developing, which is amazing, a school called Sirius, which is equipping young people in Brazil with skills for the future. So as Arnobio and I chat, we welcome you to pop whatever questions you have in the chat box, including the city you're based in, and we will get to you where possible within the session. A quick reminder, please be respectful while chatting within the session and this community. Arnobio, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Kiki. And I'm so excited to be here, to have this chat with you and with everybody that's joined us today.
Absolutely. So, Arnobio, we've already gone through your amazing accomplishments. I'm sure the attendees can probably, Google and research a little bit more about what you do. But it has been said that you are very worried and shocked at the world we're living in now. So it's clear that post-pandemic, we're living in two economies. On the one hand, you've got entrepreneurship, which is booming, while on the other hand, unemployment is chronic due to lack of preparedness with this huge gap in between. Now, you cross the ocean between the Bay Area and Brazil. How are you seeing it handled where you are now?
The main takeaway really that I keep in mind as we all move forward through the pandemic and soon post-pandemic. In Brazil, I'm calling from Brazil now, and we're still in the middle of it. It's that we have truly amazing opportunities that are happening around the world today, but that they're not evenly distributed. And for me, it's almost like we have both a dream and a nightmare. And the dream is companies are, for example, tech companies are having record revenue, record performance, and at the same time we have record unemployment. Examples of this here in Brazil. In the same time, we had record unemployment, the most we've seen in the country in decades. Tech startups also raised record venture capital. And in the US, is a similar story, right? Like tech companies grew 5 times more than non-tech companies. And I look at the data, it didn't used to be this way. It used to be then when one went up, the other one also went up, and vice versa. It's not the case anymore. It started changing in 2016, and then in 2020, it really separated. So this is really the main thing I see. We're in two economies. One is digital, the other one is analog. In some ways, we have dream opportunities happening, but in other ways, we have nightmares. And the most important thing for all of us to do is to build a future where we have more of the dream and less of the nightmare that's going on now.
That is huge, and it's so important. And thank you for that reflection. So to the audience, I encourage you to attend the ecosystem session at 9 a.m. with presenters from NASDAQ and the Startup Genome if you'd like to learn more about this specific piece that Arnobio just touched on. So Arnobio, we've heard it said that the pandemic has created an interwovenness of life and work. So you're seeing the lines are blurred. You have mentioned witnessing this new dynamic as hyperlocal and hyper global. I love that whole idea. Can you give us an illustration of what this looks like in your city and in the communities you work with in both the US and Brazil? Hyper local, hyper global, what does that mean?
Yeah, totally. So, this is, as you mentioned earlier, I wrote this book earlier in the year called Rebooted. And it's one of the big topics we talk about on it, which is we've really changed the way the world operates. And I like to think of it as the operating system of the world changed. And one of the ways this happened is that collaborations have shifted in dynamic. And it used to be that either more or less you did most everything locally, or you did a lot of things globally and not a lot locally. And I think what we're seeing now is a push on both on the hyper local side and the hyper global side. And I'll really say two stories that I think exemplify this. The first one is, you mentioned we're starting this school called Sirius, and it's going to be a university. We're in the middle of credentialing it now, and it's totally focused on tech. The students don't pay tuition, the hiring companies do. And to create it, we've really assembled an amazing team of 20 plus amazing professors, from CTOs, CEOs, top tech unicorns, people that have been for decades in academia. And the idea there is to create this really focused, targeted curriculum where we have people that come from non-technical backgrounds and become data scientists and web developers. And I see that as truly a hyper global collaboration. We have people from all over the world involved. And then at the same time, when we're talking about working with people in that we're students that we're training, the collaborations that are in the most local scale. And an example of that is we're talking with this partner called Fruto de Favela, who we're in working together and the beginnings of working together, where it's an organization in a favela in Brazil, which is a slum or shanty town in Brazil. We call this community favela, and the founder is someone that lives there, grew up there, and we're working with him to find students to participate and get trained to access this global tech market and talent market. And everything about the work they do is hyper local. It's a specific space where we have to think about how do we get the MacBooks that he was able to get with local companies to the students that get recruited in a very community driven local way. And that's really what I see as this shifting dynamics, where for solutions to really work, they'll have to go both hyper local and hyper global. So that's story one. Story two is, I've been in a career transition, like many, during the pandemic, and I was excited about the things I was doing, but not quite. I wanted to figure out something else, and this was before going all in with the university. And I was talking with a colleague that's a founder, worked at top tech companies in the Bay Area, and I was saying, I see so much happening in my home country of Brazil. I've been in the US for over a decade. I really want to do more there. But I also feel like I'm not done here in Silicon Valley. Like there's so much I still want to accomplish here, so much still I want to do. I'm not done here. And then he said, Arnobio, here where? Like, are you out of your mind? Like, what are you talking about? You can do this, anywhere. And you don't have to be here physically anymore. I don't know why you're saying this. And that really, helped me flip the switch that we can do new models. And, rationally I knew that, but I hadn't internalized it yet. And the way I'm living this new model is what we're doing now. For example, with this tech university series that we're creating. I'm here in Brazil with my wife and son. My wife is American, never lived here. That's part of the things we're negotiating as a family. So those are examples of how I see this shifting dynamics.
Wow, that is so powerful. I think for everybody that's in the audience that's watching this, I'm sure you can relate. Everybody can relate to the pandemic creating this dynamic of being hyper local, hyper global. I mean, that is exactly the position we are in right now. Wherever you are around the world tuning in to, you know, this amazing event, you are participating in a global sort of conversation, but it's very applicable to you at the local level. So thank you for that. And just want to remind the audience, if you have any questions for Arnobio or myself, make sure you take advantage of the chat box, put in your name, the country or the city that you're based in. And don't forget that we'll continue talking about the whole concept of development of skills during our sessions at 1 o'clock and 3 p.m. today. So stick around for that. So Arnobio, now, this is a huge thing. There are many different initiatives around the world focused on developing skills for entrepreneurship, which is exactly what you're doing, you know, with Sirius and the school that you're building and creating and developing. Why is it that everybody is trying to recreate Silicon Valley? And is that even possible?
I mean, the short answer is people want to recreate it is because it has been the most successful innovation engine of recent decades. It's when we take a step back and look at what happened there, it's really quite shocking. You know, it used to be that in 2008, for example, only 1 out of the 10 largest companies in the world were in tech. Today, it's 9 out of 10, and most of those are in Silicon Valley. And so it's a pretty impressive thing that has happened in the area. So that's sort of the positive side. That's why it's an attractive goal, view, vision. But the short answer is it doesn't work. Nobody can recreate Silicon Valley, right? Like it came up in one, it took decades to come up. You know, the oranges of Silicon Valley go back, especially to military technology. That federal government pumped a ton of money in the area, and that was some of the start decades ago. And radio transistors, another big one. So, you know, to look at Silicon Valley in the 2000s and say, I want to recreate that. Well, I mean, you got to go back further. You got to go back 50 years and see what was going on then. And maybe you can have a better sense of what's going on. But even then, you know, the conditions it came on was very idiosyncratic. So you cannot really recreate it. But what you can do is produce the best possible version of your ecosystem, no matter where you are. And we do see that happening. You know, one of the things that shocked me, and I've studied entrepreneurship ecosystems for years now, and I've been a founder and I am an angel investor, and I've been looking at this all around the world. And if you look at, for example, ecosystems that are creating billion-dollar startups, unicorns, and that term got popularized in 2013. You go back to 2013 when the term came up, only 4 ecosystems globally produced unicorns. Fast forward to today, and there's over 80 ecosystems that have produced unicorns, which is really an amazing sign for you know, democratization of the tech economy in terms of geography, at least. But that doesn't mean sort of that our job is done, because one, there's too many regions that are falling behind. I come from my family comes from a steel making area of the country, and it used to be that growing up, you know, everybody could get jobs there. All my uncles, my cousins, myself, if I was there, I could get jobs, you know, doing steel making or related industries. That's not the case anymore. So, you know, and like this home region is called Vale do Aço in Brazil, for those who might know. You know, we have similar stories all over the globe. And that's one part of the story. We still need to do a lot to catch those regions up. The other part of the story is that, and this really gets to one of the reasons why trying to recreate Silicon Valley is misguided, is that, you know, the model doesn't work anymore, not even for Silicon Valley itself. So the Silicon Valley model doesn't even work for Silicon Valley itself anymore. And I really want to hear how you see that at DYVVYD, because I know it's something you've been working closely on. But I'll tell one example of this is, you know, maybe San Francisco is the only place you can see a homeless person sitting outside the office of $1 billion tech startup. If there is another one, tell me. I haven't seen it yet. So those are some of thoughts on this. What do you think, Kiki? How do you see this challenge?
Well, I do see, I mean, you are completely correct, Arnobio. Silicon Valley cannot be replicated because it was built out of, 50, 60 years of R&D and, of course, military research and a lot of scientific research, and evolved into this whole industry of creating solutions for consumers and, of course, for other businesses. And before we cut to Q&A from the audience, at DYVVYD, what we're doing is we're really working to democratize the funding of startups and of innovation beyond the typical cookie cutter sort of assumption that innovation can just come from one type of group of people. You've got, it's commonly talked about in the industry, you've got this, the whole white male archetype that is the one that usually gets the funding from a lot of Silicon Valley based investment funds and angel investors as well. And so what we're doing at DYVVYD is making sure that we're able to distribute opportunities for funding to anybody that doesn't happen to fit that archetype. And in doing so, because of the pandemic, we're seeing that spreading around the world. We're getting a lot of influence from a lot of global ecosystems, a lot of incoming questions and requests for assistance, not only just like for you in Brazil, but for myself. I'm from Kenya, from East Africa, and I get the same questions. But you're right, you can't really replicate Silicon Valley. I think what we can do is find a way in our own communities, a way that's cohesive and very organic. Like I love what you're doing with the school and really equipping a lot of the young people to find innovation within and of themselves without having to rely on huge industry systems, such as what is generated by Silicon Valley. I want to quickly jump because we have about 10 more minutes left in this session, guys. So we have a question from the audience. Ed Linz is asking, you mentioned your wife moving from the US implies a lot around quality of life, relationships, and family, which often comes second place to entrepreneurial dreams. So do you, Arnobio, feel that these are aspects of the local and global future you envision? Great question, Ed. What do you think?
That's a really wonderful question, Ed. And the short answer is yes, absolutely. And this move that we're doing as a family has a lot to do with that. I'll give a hyper personal answer, and then I'll take a step back and look a bit at the big picture. The hyper personal answer is, I was thinking about the way I grew up, and it's really two ways. The way I grew up, and then I have a young son, and when he was born, that sort of triggered many of these thoughts too. And when I think about the way I grew up, it's really two things. I can truly see the opportunities that happened for my family, and this is crystal clear for me when I compare, for example, the situation I was born in versus the situation my mom was born in. So my mom was born in a house that didn't have running water, didn't have electricity, didn't have indoor plumbing, and that was just normal for that region of the country at that particular point in time. It wasn't like the family was particularly poor, but I was born in a home in a city with all of those and much more, and all kinds of opportunities. And I'm very grateful. I think entrepreneurship is a huge part of that story, entrepreneurship and education, because it was, the people building up Brazil, helping it urbanize, but then also the story of my family that were able to create these opportunities for the later generations, of which I'm very grateful for. And I could see I've had those opportunities, and I could see that was not true for a huge part of my home country in Brazil. And that was a big part of the story for me. The second big part of the story is, I mentioned I have a infant son, and I was thinking like, what values are important that I'd like him to have? And a big one for me was family. And I was like, I want him to value family like I do, like my wife does. My wife is American. She and her family is in the Midwest and Hawaii specifically. And I was like, how can I teach him to value family if we live in Silicon Valley with no family around? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That would be impossible. So in a very personal way, I figured that I had to change things up so that I could value precisely the things you mentioned, Ed, around quality of life, relationship, and family. So that's my personal answer. The global answer is, I think it truly is the case that at the same time we have this very tough global economic scenario, and it's improving in many places, and it's basically uneven. But it's also the case that we have new opportunities in ways we couldn't have before. A couple examples of that is, for instance, 50% of Fortune 500 companies were started during a recession, which should be a sign for us that this is the time for the next great generation of companies to also come up. And it's also the case that certain things became more flexible. My wife is a social worker and therapist, and it is the case that she can work from other places now. She doesn't have to be in the US anymore. And that is true for other types of work also. So when I think about the future we can all build, I want, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that quality of life and relationships and family will be a part of it. It's not a prediction, but it's something we can act on, and we can, and even if the trends are against that, and which sadly in many ways they are, we have the opportunity to build these interwoven in our lives in a way we couldn't even 5 years ago.
Powerful. Thank you, Arnobio. So we have about 5 minutes left. If you could, Arnobio, in a quick sort of succinct way, just to close that out, following from Ed Linz's question in regard to family and how family is very impactful in creating a sensation of having that sense of support while you are continuing with your entrepreneurial journey. So we have a final session in the track, and it's entitled How Communities Build Entrepreneurs. And it is a little bit of another lens on ecosystem. So what is different, would you say, following on Ed Linz's question about community-centric entrepreneurship, and why is it a critical skill set for communities? We have about 5 more minutes left.
The reality is that nobody starts businesses alone. You have co-founders, you have business partners, you have teammates, you have investors, you have suppliers, you have buyers, you have friends that support you, you have family that supports you if you're fortunate. And given that nobody starts business alone, communities are really crucial on helping us all realize the entrepreneurial potential of ourselves, but then also our cities, our states, our countries. And the focus on community and ecosystems is something I've been studying for many years, both at Startup Genome, studying and working on both at Startup Genome, doing innovation policy in over 35 countries, as well as the Kaufman Foundation, which is a multi-billion-dollar philanthropy focused on supporting entrepreneurship in the US. And one of the curious things you learn as you start going down that route is the importance of connectivity and communities. And I'll give an example of that. When you plot and this is an analysis we've done at Startup Genome, when you look at how much value startups create in an ecosystem, depending on how many companies are there, you see that each additional startup increases the average value they bring. So you have an ecosystem with just a couple hundred startups. The average startups add a couple $1 million in extra value. When you get to Silicon Valley, that value multiplies by 10 because you have so many other startups that support each other. And when you plot it on a graph, you see every step along the way, and it's a clear relationship where the more companies you have, the more value each individual company are. And it's also the case that, and it's another thing we found out at Startup Genome, local connectedness and global connectedness. And local connectedness is about founders helping each other, being connected to one another. We've measured it very carefully globally. In global connectedness is how founders are connected to others around the world. For both of those, they're among the top predictors of success, both at the startup level and the ecosystem level. And that's really, looking at communities as a tool of entrepreneurship is really one of the ways I see the new way of doing economic development, the new way of doing industrial policy. It's pretty crucial, and I encourage everyone here to both check out that session, but think about how you're building community where you are.
Awesome. I mean, in today's session, we've had Brazil represented with you, Arnobio. I'm from Kenya. I'm based in San Francisco, as Arnobio is back and forth as well, to and from the Bay Area. So to everybody who was able to attend today, that is our time. It was such a pleasure to have you all. I wish we got to know all the countries that you're all representing and the cities and ecosystems that you're all representing. But if possible, please stay with us. The rest of today has a couple of really powerful sessions that are definitely able to equip you into that next level of entrepreneurship, if that is the path that you are willing to follow. To our speaker today, Arnobio, thank you for coming all the way from Brazil. What time is it there?
12:45.
PM or AM?
PM. We're good.
Okay.
Perfect
awesome.
time. Yeah.
Perfect time. All right.
Yeah.
It was great to have everybody. Thank you for coming. And we will see you at the next Global Skills Day. Enjoy your day.
Thank you so much. See you around.
All right. Bye, everyone.